Speaker, side opposition accuses us of being extremely insensitive when we laugh at their case, but we think it's extremely shameful that this is a side proposition which is comparing evangelists with Nazis, Mr. Speaker, which is comparing the brilliant work which the Vatican has been doing in Africa to fill that void which governments have created, Mr. Speaker, in terms of their responsibility towards their citizens, in terms of ensuring their welfare, Mr. Speaker. It's extremely shameful. I'm going to look at three broad issues. I'm going to firstly look at what is the threshold for charging, because in as much as they say that this is a value judgment debate, they need to come out here and clearly say what is the criteria for charging, Mr. Speaker. Let me tell you, so the first issue is what is the threshold for charging, what is the importance of the church. Secondly, I'm going to talk about what is the fundamental importance of freedom of expression and religion, and we think that's a principal harm on our side of the house. And more importantly, my third issue is going to be about the practical harm of why the church gets offended and pulls out. Let's look at the very first issue, Mr. Speaker. What is the threshold for charging? And we tell you, Mr. Speaker, right from the very first speaker, we told you that there is a very clear standard which is being set by the ICC, which is in fact that you go ahead and charge a person with these kind of crimes against humanity in cases of rape, in cases of systemic killing, in cases of genocide, Mr. Speaker. What stands common between all of these, Mr. Speaker? It's about intent. It's about the intent, Mr. Speaker. It's about having this intent for gross violation of bodily autonomy and life, Mr. Speaker. We don't think on side proposition any of them were able to compare that level of harm and show that there's necessarily that this transmission of AIDS through the church message is in any way comparable to that, because we told you otherwise. But we went to a second level, Mr. Speaker. We told you in fact that you need to look at the overall message of the state, of the Vatican, because let alone the fact that they aren't even looking to kill people. The overall message is one of telling people that look, abstain from sex, abstain from promiscuity. You should only indulge in sex for procreation. This is analysis given out by my first speaker, which they absolutely stated about. So how do you then compare this message to that of Nazis who just says go out and kill Jews by the words of the fact that they are Jews? No analysis on that side of the house, Mr. Speaker. But on the third level, we tell you, Mr. Speaker, that if you really were to stand by their logic, that this one gave you numerous examples of abuse. If you really want to stand by that logic, then you can prosecute so many tons of people across the world. We point you to rebel tribes in Africa who also indulge in mass killings. We point you to Islamic governments in Saudi Arabia which promote suppression of women and killing of women just because they were outside their house when they were raped, Mr. Speaker. Isn't that extremely, extremely despicable? We pointed you to so many examples. In fact, if you use their benchmark, Mr. Speaker, you should actually be charging the governments of Africa with crimes against humanity, because A, they did not provide food and shelter to these people which led to mass deaths in Africa. But moreover, they didn't provide schools, Mr. Speaker, which should in fact go ahead and spread their message. But instead, Mr. Speaker, we saw the Vatican coming and doing good. What did the Vatican do? We told you that the Vatican does a lot of good work. We told you how there are a lot of practical influences, practical benefits in terms of providing education, food, water, sanitation. And let's not mistake, Mr. Speaker, they're filling in a void. Ideally, yeah, sure, we would probably like people to know about contraception and whatnot, but it's not feasible in the status quo. Why? Because these governments are corrupt. These governments just don't come in and provide them the requisite education, provide them the requisite food and shelter. So what are you providing as an alternative? Nothing, right? We tell you at the end of the day, that's where the Vatican has stepped in and actually, been this benevolent and actually done this good work, Mr. Speaker, which is why we think it's extremely, extremely wrong for them to go ahead and go and charge them. We think it's extremely offensive. What do you have to say to that, Kenneth?
They continue that good work, continue preaching abstinence, but why must you continue saying that condoms are wrong when the use of condoms will save millions of lives?
Yeah, okay, I'll come to that in my next issue, which is about the freedom of expression and religion, right? So, we already, this is again something that they already didn't clash with us about. They themselves conceded that religion is a core aspect of a person's identity. It's something that gives a person hope, and this is also one of the main reasons why, one of the main reasons why Vatican is doing such a good job in a country which is filled with strife, which is filled with rape, where people are displaced from villages. these people go ahead and give them hope, Mr. Speaker. Moreover, the Vatican goes ahead and gives them a framework of discipline, which in fact perhaps makes most of these Africans much better than those other rebels who have no faith and no moral whatsoever, Mr. Speaker. But moreover, we tell you that this is a very, very core and integral aspect of the Christian religion. Like we already talked to you about how the Bible itself says that any form of unnatural, prevention of basically any form of unnatural procreation, like the very fact that even usage of contraception to prevent procreation, Mr. Speaker, is in itself completely unacceptable. We told you how this is a very, very fundamental tenet, Mr. Speaker, and that's when we talk, and that's when we throw doubt at that idea of people even being responsive to their message. Because firstly, they have thrown to us why the Vatican will accept, but even if the Vatican accepts, we're talking about a continent which has seen the influence of Christianity for centuries. Will they even be perceptive to this message, given how integral it's become to them, Mr. Speaker, given how integral it's become to their beliefs? We tell you we don't even believe that's the case, Mr. Speaker. Moreover, we tell you that even if the Vatican officially states a line just to appease the ICC that, oh, you know what, we no longer support this, will the preachers on the ground really believe it? We don't think so, Mr. Speaker. It's a very core aspect of their identity. And that's what you fail to understand, Mr. Speaker. And as much as you try to label it as three standards, all you were saying was that there's greater accountability, and all you need to do to match up with that standard is to create a base to these, but you really don't need to enforce that on the ground level. We don't think you've been able to prove that. So what is the last level of harm? Sit down. We told you that there's an immense harm. There's an immense harm because you're grossly offending the Vatican. We've already shown you why it's a very integral aspect of Christian beliefs, and it's something that stood all through the times, through time immemorial. So we think when you ask them to go ahead and change their message, they're likely to pull out, Mr. Speaker. They're likely to in fact rebel against the West and say that you've insulted all of the good work we've done for centuries. You've insulted the fact that we've cut slack for Western governments for not going ahead and actually invading corrupt regimes, and you've gone ahead and actually saved many of these people with our good work, and we think that's extremely, extremely offensive. But moreover, we tell you, Mr. Speaker, that if you go by that standard, it's just creating a slippery slope. They said, oh, you know what, it should be prosecuted for this. We asked them about homosexuals, or they said, yeah, okay, charge them for that. Let's say tomorrow, what if someone dies because they didn't take the option of abortion, and that leads to a lot of killings? Are you going to move that as well? Are you going to ask them to compromise on that? If you ask them to keep compromising on each and every fundamental tenet, then what is left of your religion? We think that is a big harm. You're asking them to give up on every single fundamental tenet of their religion, Mr. Speaker. You're asking them to compromise on their freedom of expression and their freedom of religion, which is so extremely core to their identity and extremely core to their beliefs, Mr. Speaker. It gives people in Africa hope, and these people see life in Africa. We're extremely proud to oppose.
Yeah.